Good evening. Thank you all for coming. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to our Awareness 3.0 evening. On behalf of Project Yes and the Center for Jewish Family Life, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come and to learn more about raising our children and educating the young men and women in our schools. There's a very powerful Rashi on a pasuk in Parshas Kisavai, which we will be reading in a few weeks. The pasuk says in the Teichacha, in the part where we read about the tragedies that will befall Klal Yisrael if Chas v'Shalom we do not follow the mandates of our mitzvahs. V'zaratem l'rik zarechem v'achalu oivechem. Pasuk says, V'zaratem l'rik zarechem, you will plant for naught. You'll plant your seeds in the ground. It seems that's what it's referring to. V'achalu oivechem, you'll be planting for nothing because your enemies will come and consume that you had planted. And there are quite a few Mefarshim that offer different interpretations of what this pasuk means. And Rashi says, one of the pshatim that Rashi mentions is Kineged Habanim v'Habanais Diber HaKasav. That the pasuk is really referring, it's a euphemism for children. Children are our ultimate goal and our dream, everything that we work for. And v'zaratem l'rik zarechem, you'll plant, so to speak, and put your effort. Sha'ata omal behenu magadlon, Rashi says, you work and you put all your effort and your love and your time and patience and everything we have into our children. V'achet ba'umachala oisam. Chman l'tzlan. And they're consumed by chet, or they're consumed by the temptations and everything that's out there that's contrary to what we wish to instill in our children. And this evening is really intended to help parents avoid this terrible tragedy. I titled this and called it Awareness 3.0 because I would like to offer an heightened and a new phase in our efforts to see to it that each and every one of our boys and girls achieve success in our yeshivas and our Beis Yaakovs and in our own homes. It's almost 10 years now that we began to realize that we have a significant challenge with many of our young men and women. And about 1996, we began to energize ourselves and our communities to try to address the needs of the kids that were not making it in school. And what happened over the past 10 years is that after the initial shock wore off, and after we spent a year or two scrambling and trying to help our kids, I called it Awareness 2.0, where we started to get much better at what we were doing and are doing for our kids. Some of the wonderful agencies that are represented tonight got better at what we did, Project Yes, Mask, many of the individuals who are here as clinicians and as professionals. The Yatzkan Center was formed as a substance abuse treatment center, and many, many other agencies, OHEL, Children's Home, many agencies step forward and try to do what they can to help our kids. And what we're really talking about now is heightening our awareness and trying to see to it that we provide services to detect early intervention, to find out exactly what's going on with our children in school and what we can do to see to it that each and every one of our children really do achieve success. I'd like to thank our wonderful team of presenters for taking the time and effort to come out tonight and present to you. I'd like to thank Rabbi Gluck, Director of Operations of Project Yes, our entire staff at Project Yes, and Miss Esti Krzyzewski, who worked so hard to put this evening together. I'm going to read through, very briefly, the program and some of the presenters who will be here this evening and some of the topics that they will be speaking about. Dr. Benzin Tursky, who's an outstanding mental health professional and a very dear friend of mine. His first presentation will be about substance abuse. We call it Substance Abuse 1.0, and he will be speaking about recognizing symptoms of substance abuse and what it looks like to parents and to educators. His second presentation will be about the very growing issue of gambling in our community. We're all familiar with some of the other facets of antisocial behavior, alcohol abuse and substance abuse. Gambling is something that perhaps has been under our radar for too long and is a genuinely significant issue that must be dealt with and recognized. Learning disabilities, we have the privilege of having Richard Altaby and Dr. Marcy Schaefer will be presenting on learning disabilities, how to recognize them, what parents can do to get intervention for their children, what testing is about, and what parents can do when they see their children are underachieving in school. Rabbi Shmuel Ackerman, who we have the fortune to have on our staff at Project S, will be speaking about the principles of mentoring, what we've learned over the years about mentoring, and how to train lay people to get some of these very useful tools that we train our mentors with at Project Yes. I spoke earlier about the original phase of our awareness and how we've heightened the awareness to a higher level. Many of the agencies that had mentoring programs originally came to realize the value of how important it is to really train them properly before setting them out. And we've come to the notion, to the idea, and some of our donors had suggested it. One of our donors who's here in the audience strongly suggested it to me recently, that we take the concept of mentoring and all the training that goes with mentoring and offer it to the public at large and offer people at large some of the skills that we give to our mentors. We have the pleasure of having Mrs. Ruchama Clapman, who is the very dynamic founder, director, the light and energy behind Mask, which started as now it's Mothers and Fathers Aligned to Save Kids. It's a referral agency for parents who have issues with their children, and Mask provides a wide range and array of services, and they really do a wonderful job. She's going to be presenting about support groups. We have a double presentation by Mrs. Rivka Rabinowitz, who's here from Eretz Yisrael, and she's going to be presenting about what challenges parents face when they send children to Eretz Yisrael, and about long-distance parenting, what to do when you do have kids in Eretz Yisrael, how to keep on top of what's going on there, and how to keep close contact with your children. Dr. David Pelkowitz, an outstanding therapist and a leader in the field of mental health professionals in the Orthodox community, is going to be speaking about recognizing signs of depression and suicide in the first segment, and that is a huge issue. Very often I speak myself as the Manal of the yeshiva and a former Rebbe for 15 years and a parent, Kanahara, of 4 teenagers and a 9-year-old. And very often I find that both in terms of yeshivas and my friends of my children, and very often we see some kids sliding into some sort of depression, and very often it's not recognized. So as with many other components of this evening, it's not necessarily education, it's much more in terms of awareness, how to key you in as to what some of the signs are and how to go to help and what to do if you do see some of these signs. So Dr. Pelkowitz will be speaking in the first segment about signs of depression, and he will be speaking about obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD, in the second session. And obsessive-compulsive disorder, very briefly, is when youngsters and sometimes adults get overly obsessed with certain behaviors and do them repetitively. Very often, a layperson just will not understand what that is and try to deal with it without having a deep understanding of it. In the second segment, Dr. Lou Abrams is from the Yatzkan Center. The Yatzkan Center is the only kosher facility for teens, or Jewish teens who are for substance abuse and to treat substance abuse and rehab. It is temporarily in Westchester, New York, and within next year it will be relocated in Brooklyn. Recognizing signs of eating disorder, Mrs. Angie Obora will be presenting in the second segment. And the last segment that I did not mention for the second half of our evening is preventing abuse, neglect, and molestation, and Barry Horowitz will be presenting on that subject. So we have a wider range and array of topics. I hope that you will all take advantage of this evening. I would strongly suggest, as one who does attend many conferences and sessions, grab a pen and paper, try to take notes, listen carefully to what the presenters are saying, maybe ask for some referrals or tips on what to do if you do find that these issues are meaningful to you. We will be taping professionally, videotaping, and audio taping all of the sessions so that they will be available to you. It will probably take us a couple of weeks to prepare them for dissemination. I would like to thank my dear Chaver, Mr. Michael Stein, for assisting with underwriting some of the costs associated with disseminating some of this material and preparing this evening. And I offer a short tefillah to daven to the Rabbanu Shalom that this information should be of help to all of us, and we should collectively raise our awareness and be able to parent our children and raise them to be a source of nachas to themselves, to their families, to our communities, and to all of Klal Yisrael. Once again, my special thanks to the staff at Project Yes, to the people Rabbi Gluck and Ms. Kushevsky, for all the work they put into the session, and especially to our outstanding presenters. I really appreciate your time and your effort in coming down. We're going to be starting our first segment in a few minutes. 2 sessions will be down on this floor. We have 2 sessions on the ground level and 2 sessions up on the 5th floor. We'll leave you a few minutes to go to your respective rooms, and we'll get started. Thank you very, very much. And again, best wishes for Hatzlacha. Thank you.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to see that there's people who are interested in the topic. Not just because I have an audience, but because there's a lot of things about the topic that are very important that we need to hear. All right, we're talking about substance abuse 1.0, and our subtitle to that is with a focus on alcohol and smoking. And I think that this is a topic that is very important. I think that we are underinformed. We're underinformed about what goes into the problem and what goes into the use of tobacco and alcohol. We are uninformed about when the issue becomes problematic, and we are uninformed about what to do about it. Quite a number of years ago, there was a difficulty in accessing hotels for kosher events, dinners, weddings. Can you get a kosher wedding at hotel such and such? Well, there were a lot of hotels that would not accept the kosher business. And the reason was because the biggest profit came from the bar, came from the sale of alcohol. And back in the 1950s, Jews don't drink. This changed. And somewhere in the early 70s, hotels were calling the kashrus agencies saying, could you please give a hechsher so that we can open a kosher kitchen, so we can run kosher events. Why was that? Because now the Jews drink like everybody else. This was 35 years ago. In the interim, there have been many more highly noticeable cases of alcoholism in the Jewish community. in general and in the frum community in particular. Things that were foreign to us became commonplace. And we're not talking about cell phones. We're talking about coming home from work and taking a drink as just the thing to do. I mean, once upon a time we heard about this on television, where somebody comes home from work and they have a little bar at home and they help themselves to a mixed drink. This was never something that took place in a Torah-observant home. And it began to happen. And there's the use of alcohol liberally at all sorts of affairs, from simchas to dinners. And there's a smorgasbord before a wedding, and there's a smorgasbord before your fundraising dinners. And these are all laden with alcohol. And I'm not sure that I have the background to tell you exactly how much drinking goes on outside of the Jewish community, but when you see that the bar always has people lined up in front of it at a fundraising dinner, or that you have these rolling bars at various simchas where, yes, they will card you, yes, they will check your driver's license, but there are always people lined up taking drinks. So, you know what? The alcohol is there, and the use and the drinking is going on. We've always historically taken a rather parv and a rather quiet approach to dealing with alcohol. Let me explain that. We legitimize it in many different ways. For instance, we have a good deal of ritual use of alcohol. You have kiddush, you have wine. At a bris, you have wine. At a chasana, you have wine. Yayin yisamach olav. Enosh, we use wine characteristically as part of a simcha. That's understood. What happens with everything else? Now, you know what? There's a meaning that probably goes back to many generations before I can remember, where a Shalom Zocha had to serve beer. Didn't have to serve hard liquor, but you sort of found that there too. But these things have become so massive that the beer can flow at a Shalom Zocha as fast as the soda used to. So it is not a foreign thing anymore for drinking to become extremely commonplace, and not just the little taste here or the little taste there. What about Purim? In yeshiva, Purim was, this is our chance. And your average yeshiva bocher would make plans sometimes weeks in advance of what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. I had a roommate who was a ben Torah and is still a Rebbe in day schools today, who planned weeks before how he would control his diet to make sure that he had proper nutrition prior to that. And he would drink, I believe his remedy was to drink 2 cups of milk an hour before the alcohol starts. And his logic was that it coats the stomach and you can get drunk without getting sick. And this was planned weeks before. I knew about it weeks before. It reached a point that after 4 years watching the drinking of Purim get worse each year, that I finally, for Purim, got up and left. And I went elsewhere. Simchas Torah. I have no idea who concocted this one. But Simchas Torah has become the wettest yontif we have. It sometimes puts Purim to shame. I have no idea who concocted the idea that you can only be b'simcha and dance on Simchas Torah if you are under the influence of alcohol. But what I watched in more than one shul was Ma'ariv goes on Simchas Torah at night. Before Hakafas, people go off to the side. They take full-size coffee glasses and they fill them with liquor and they make kiddush on liquor. And they drink as much of the liquor as one would of wine. mind you, the alcohol content is somewhere between 4 and 10 times that of wine. And that's what they make Kiddush on. And then, to my chagrin, they hold a Sefer Torah and then they try to coordinate their feet dancing. And I get very frightened. I get very frightened not just by the fact that to me this is not simcha, this is intoxication. To me this is drunkenness. To me, if one's mind is lost, how can one truly be in a matzav of simcha? I just can't understand that. But then, I am just as frightened by the display, by the community leaders and the adults in shul showing to kids, this is what we do to really be besimcha. Now, one year, my father had the position of president of the shul, and Shabbos Cholamoyed Sukkos, he gets up and he says, my friends, I would like to read to you a halacha from the Rambam. And he proceeds to read the halacha where the Rambam says specifically that one may not daven under the influence of alcohol. If one has had a revi'is yayin, which is a measure of somewhere between 3 and 4 ounces worth of wine, one is considered intoxicated and one may not daven at that point. And the Rambam goes on to specify that if one believes that they are achieving a more spiritual level in their tefillah, they should know that not only they are not having that benefit, but they are actually undermining the value and rendering that tefillah unacceptable. So they're actually damaging the quality of their davening by having imbibed alcohol before. I walked home from shul later that day, and one of my neighbors came over to me and says, I think that was very improper. Because we just went through Chodesh Elul where we were so preoccupied with doing tshuva. And then we had the seriousness of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and then Sukkah where we went into the Sukkah with our entire guf, our entire body, and we were participating in this real spiritual simcha. And in order for us to hit the zenith, the top point of simcha and simchas Torah, we need the alcohol to bring us to that because we are so down on ourselves with all the other things of Elul and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Yontif. And I looked at him and I said, you didn't learn that Rambam. The Rambam said that the avodas Hashem that is done under the influence of alcohol is an abomination. It is a toyeva. It is exactly the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. So I witnessed resistance over there. I wanted to tell a story. Some years ago, I received a referral from a Rav out of town. It was actually a telephone consultation. I have a heroin addict in my community who's now facing trouble with the police, with the law. He'll go to jail. I want to get him into a treatment program so maybe he can not have to do time. And we got into a discussion about what to do with that case and a number of other issues related to drugs and alcohol. And then this Rav said to me the following. He says, in my shul, there is no alcohol on Simchas Torah, and that in my shul, he says, we even ask all the members of the Kehillah to refrain from any alcohol over Simchas Torah, including at home. That's a far stretch. When your rabbi tells you what to do and not to do at home. And he tells me what happened. He says, quite a number of years ago, he says, my son is already in his 20s. He says, when my son was 8 years old, one of his friends came over to play at our house. No, the other way. My son went to his friend's house to play on a Sunday afternoon. They only had school in the morning, The afternoon was clear, and he went to play at his friend's house. He says, I get a phone call from the other father saying, please come, pick up your son, and take him home immediately. They got into my liquor cabinet. Now, let me explain this. The other father makes his own wine for Pesach. So he has whatever the apparatus is behind lock and key in the cellar. What happened was that the two boys were downstairs in the basement in the playroom playing, and they were going to play a game called Simchas Torah. Now, we can picture our children playing Simchas Torah. You take some pillow that's in a cylinder shape, you take a big bath towel and you put that on as a talus, you hold the cylinder, right? That's your Sefer Torah, and you jump around and dance and have a good time. No. They said in order for us to do this, we've got to break the lock and get to the wine, and we have to drink. And they drank until they were passing out. Father was upstairs, and he goes down, got a little quiet. He goes downstairs to look, and there's two kids totally passed out, unconscious, on the basement floor. So he grabbed the phone, and he called the rabbi to come pick up his son. And he says, we'll have to discuss this later. Right now, there's action to do. Rabbi says, I took my son home. I had to carry him into the car. He was delirious. He was not even with it. I took him home. I put him in a tub of cold water. Nothing changed. I tried everything that I could fathom. Shake him up, roll him this way, stand him up. Nothing made a difference. He says, I finally took him to the hospital. They right away did a blood alcohol level. Now, one of the things we've watched in terms of blood alcohol levels is that most states had a blood alcohol level in order to be legally drunk, driving under the influence. It was lowered from 0.20 to 0.10. And most states, and I believe all states by now, have lowered it to 0.08. And that is a fraction of a percent of alcohol in the blood. This young man had many times the legal limit for driving while intoxicated. He's 8 years old. We're not worried about him with a driver's license. But we're talking about somewhere in the vicinity of 0.4 being comatose. 0.5 is called the coroner. And he was at that level. He was in intensive care for over a week. He recovered. He has never touched a drop of alcohol since then. He refuses to eat ice cream that has any sort of topping because he has to check to see, is there alcohol in it? I don't want any of that stuff. This led the Rov to make the observation that our children identify Simchas Torah not with the joy, not with the Torah, not with the gratitude of the fact that we now have completed going through Chumash and we're about to start it all over again. None of that. They equated their major identification of Simchas Torah was getting drunk. He says, if that's the case, we have been behaviorally teaching our children the wrong message. And we have to back off. We've got to change that. And that's when he decided Simchas Torah must be dry. A couple things about alcohol. This is a little bit, I'm going to go into a few minutes worth of some scientific stuff. Alcohol is not digested. When somebody takes in alcohol into their stomach, the alcohol is absorbed directly into the blood, and then it goes wherever it goes, does whatever it does, it's not digested. A person whose digestive system is non-functional, the alcohol will still get through. It only digests whatever else there is in the drink besides the alcohol. There is such a thing as tolerance. Let's look at what that means. The body must process the alcohol because it's not good to leave it where it is. It goes through the blood gets washed through the liver. The liver is the filtering system. The liver has to break it down. And it does. The only thing is that you can't overwork the liver, because at some point the liver is going to deteriorate. It'll develop all sorts of illnesses. It will fail. There's cirrhosis of the liver. And there are some of these conditions that can reach the point where you're talking liver transplant. And I, in fact, know of several alcoholics who've destroyed their livers and had liver transplants. I will tell you that the transplant community does not want to do transplants in alcoholics, because why would we give you a new part if you're going to destroy it? So they really have to be convinced, if they're dealing with an alcoholic, that the drinking days are completely over. So they're very careful with that. Let's put this in the context of our community looking at alcohol as part of our lifestyle and not being vigilant to recognize that this is a potential poison and a potential danger. I will not tell you that there's anything wrong with making Kiddush on wine. I will not tell you that there's anything terribly wrong with having a small cup of beer at a Shalom Zocher. I will not tell you that there's anything wrong with a l'chaim. There's a statement that is commonly heard in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. Once a cucumber has become a pickle, it never becomes a cucumber again. And that is one of the things that happens with alcohol. Once somebody has an alcohol problem, and there are different levels of problem, once it has become a problem, the cucumber has become a pickle. There is only one way to manage that, and that is with complete abstinence. Zero. Like a young man who won't eat ice cream with a topping on it because of the fear that maybe there is alcohol in the topping. When one will visit a professional with an alcohol problem, the question that has to be asked is, okay, what is the degree of problem here? And then there's a careful history that is taken. Typically, an addict or an alcoholic's honesty is very questionable. It's marginal at best, but to the degree that one can get an accurate history. There's several things that we need to understand. One is that there are two diagnostic labels. And as you will hear with Lou Abrams in the second chelik of this program, where he's going to talk about drugs, this is the same as with drugs, where there is a diagnosis of alcohol abuse and a second diagnosis of alcohol dependence. The bottom line, the common element to both of them, is that the individual will drink alcohol despite the fact that it leads to negative consequences. Now, most of us, if you know that you've eaten a vegetable and it didn't agree with you and you broke out in hives or you had a terrible stomachache, you're probably not going to do it again. Any animal, any lower form of life will ingest the food, will experience something uncomfortable, and it won't eat it again. The addict doesn't do that. The addict says it's because I had too little and I need more, or I need to do it again. And there's something very queer about that kind of thinking. It's like, wait a minute, you ate something, it made you feel sick, but you want to go and do it all over again? Why? Another version of this is the simple muscle. You walk into a room and you flip the light switch on, and the light doesn't go on. Do you stand there and flip the switch again and again? You might flick the switch another 1 or 2 times in the remote chance that maybe there's something loose in there, right? Like, did I push it up all the way? But after you've done that, you're going to go check the circuit breaker or the bulb. There's got to be a reason why this light's not working. Your alcoholic has tried, or your alcohol abuser has done something, and it didn't have positive consequences. Their seichel, their logic is, I need to do it again just to make sure. And back to the mashal, they'll flip the switch 5,000 times, that maybe if it didn't go on after the second time, it'll go off after 4,999 times, which is ridiculous thinking. But that's the way the addict thinks. Next time will be different. Again, to borrow a statement from AA, the addict is somebody who does the same thing and expects a different outcome. We're dealing with a problem that very often goes unnoticed. I speak to people casually, neighbors in Shul or wherever, and they want to know what I'm doing, and I tell them, they say, I look around the Shul, I don't see any alcoholics here. I consulted to an alcoholic this week. In one sitting, he can polish off a fifth of hard liquor. And no, he doesn't make kiddush on wine. Why waste the wine on something like that? I asked him where he davens. He says, I sometimes daven here. Once in a while I'll daven there. I said, where do you usually daven? He says, why are you asking me that? I said, because I want to know. He says, I usually don't. And this is a very frum guy. Frum guy. You see him walking down the street, it would never enter your mind. This is a guy who either doesn't daven or doesn't go to shul on Shabbos. The thought would never cross your mind. It is a problem that very often remains very hidden, because the more out of control a person's drinking gets, the more likely they are to take steps to hide it. And some alcoholics do a marvelous job of hiding it. You know how many of them lose jobs, and it's because I have a lousy boss who doesn't understand me? Or they wouldn't give me a day off when I needed it? Or we just couldn't get along? Or the boss made up some stories about me that weren't true, and I resigned before he would fire me? I've seen a lot of that. I've seen youngsters, I'm talking now all ages, youngsters, who pick up liquor, who pick up the idea of drinking at an extremely young age, 8 and 9. I'm not going to tell you that it's common, but it's not rare either. There are shuls where when there's a kiddush on Shabbos and there's a bottle or two of liquor on the table, nobody monitors it to make sure who takes it and who doesn't. I have watched fathers hand shot glasses at least half full to young children to be tayyim from kiddush. I was shocked. So what you need to know is that there are varying degrees to which an alcohol, of seriousness or intensity of alcohol problems. It's sort of divided into the categories of abuse and dependence, at least in terms of the technicality of it. But it goes much beyond that. You realize that some of the symptoms of alcoholism or alcohol dependence include tolerance. Now, a normal person, starting from scratch, what is the tolerance to a shot glass of liquor, which is the equivalent of a full becher of wine? Most people would find that a little bit challenging. We're not talking about sipping and it's during a meal and it's over an extended period of time. Most people would find that a bit challenging. What would you say if somebody can put away a 6-pack of beer in one sitting? That's pretty good. I remember matching notes with a counselor at the outpatient program that I used to work at. And while he was Jewish, he was certainly not from, he was from a non-from background. And I said to him, how long would a 6-pack of beer last in your house? He says, well, how long does it last by you? He said it gets sold with the chametz at least once. And he says, by me? So it can last a year in your house? I said, sure. He says, well, by me it lasts about 10 minutes. Oh, that goes back to his drinking days. I don't know how anybody could put away a 6-pack of beer in 10 minutes unless you got 20 people lined up trying to help. But there are people who can do that. Where I daven, there's a kiddush at almost every second or third table. This one made by mitzvah, somebody else has an eifah, someone else has Shabbat Sheva brachas, there's 1 or 2 people with a yotzeit, right? So everybody's running over, and you can conceivably go to this table and have a shot of liquor, and Vinshal L'chaim and Mazel Tov. Go to the next table, have another shot of liquor, Vinshal L'chaim and Mazel Tov. You came into Shachrus dead sober, you're walking out dead drunk. And nobody noticed anything more than you drinking a shot in one place. So I've seen this happen. It's not rare. Maybe it's not everybody that you know, but there's a good bit of it going on. What should we do about it? We have to begin to take action. We must make simchas dry. We must take the bull by the horns. Look at what you're putting on your table. Look at what you're serving at a simcha. I protest if I see a bar at a fundraising dinner. People didn't come here to drink. They came here to have a good meal and to put down whatever they're going to be donating. They didn't come to get drunk. They didn't come to have mixed drinks. They didn't come to socialize over martinis, which I really think undermines most of the causes for which we have these fundraising dinners. And much the same thing goes for a simcha. If you need liquor to be besimcha, you got a problem, get a good therapist. We need to insist that there's no drinking at Simchas Torah. We need to insist that there are strict controls over Purim, what goes on. When there are yeshivas that sponsor the serving of liquor, we have a problem. Forget about the legality of bocher being under the age of 18 and whatever. I'm not even dealing with that. I'll let somebody from the DA's office come and talk about that. I'm talking about yeshiva bocherim who circulate and go from this Rebbe's house to that Rebbe's house, and they're being served wine and liquor. The Rebbeim know very well that nobody is just going to taste it and move on. They know it's Purim, and people believe that it's a mitzvah to become intoxicated. I urge everybody to look up what the Paiskim say and recognize the fact that virtually all Paiskim are against the kind of intoxication that is so abhorrent to us. So this old adage that shikar is a goy is really somewhere back in history. It's no longer present tense. I'd like to move on to the other half of what we're talking about, and then I want to put both sections of this into context. Tobacco. Many, many years ago, I heard a tape of a comedian describing the discovery of tobacco in the 13 colonies and it being shipped back to Mother England. And they're trying to figure out, like, you're sending a boatload of leaves to England. Come off, come November, the streets of London have plenty of leaves. And it got more and more humorous. You what? You roll it up and you set fire to it and you inhale the smoke. Why don't you just stick your head in the fireplace? If you want to think about it, it is pretty strange. If you burn a pot of chicken, you ventilate your kitchen. Why would you purposely burn something to inhale smoke? Tobacco was once looked at very, very favorably by our community and by society at large. It is still one of the best-selling products in the world. Baruch Hashem, smoking has decreased steadily in the United States. Baruch Hashem, yeshivas today in America, do not permit smoking in their Beis Medrash. In many cases, these are state laws that have made it against the law because it's a public place. But the prevalence of smoking is still something which is problematic, and not just for the health, mainly for the health reasons, but for reasons other than that. I've had the discussion about smoking with peers and relatives and neighbors and whoever sits at the same table as me in the shul, and many people turn around and say, yeah, but Moshe didn't, he wrote a tshuva about smoking and he didn't say that there was an issur to smoke. My answer is, read it. And he said, as of Tafshin Chaf Beis, 1962, if you are not already addicted to smoking, you're not allowed to start. Very clear, black on white. I challenge everybody to look it up. So the same boys that live in my neighborhood who are smoking, they weren't even born at the time that tshuva was written. They will run and accept a chumrah from Rav Moshe on anything and everything. They will run and accept a heta from him on anything, and he was Rabban Shakal B'nai HaGaila. This is not a statement to minimize Rav Moshe in any way. On the contrary, he was one of the greatest of our time. Rav Moshe's tshuva was based on currently outdated information. It was perhaps current at the time about the dangers of smoking. But that tshuva is also not the only reference that we can look at to talk about what's the status of smoking for a Ben Torah or for members of a Torah observant community. The Chofetz Chaim, who was nifter in the 1930s, has several references to smoking, where he says in one place, one is not allowed to smoke because it will take him away from learning. Even a few minutes here and a few minutes there, over a year, it totals up to many hours worth of bittul Torah. I can handle that one. Many people will say, yeah, but I wouldn't have been learning then anyways. And okay, so you've got yourself a nice rationalization. He goes on to say that smoking does have impact on health. And he wasn't basing this on federal government's research. This was an observation. Okay, but again, it's a limited amount of that, and it's a suffix, and it only happens over a long period of time, and all the other forms of denial that we're well acquainted with. But then he makes another very interesting statement. And I want to preface it by giving you a couple of items of fact about smoking. Nicotine is not really psychoactive. It may have a stimulant effect, it's more of a physical effect. It doesn't really do anything for the mind. Your cognition isn't any better with the nicotine or without it. Or I'm going to refer to nicotine. There's hundreds of other substances in cigarette smoke, but we're just going to refer to nicotine for now. It's not psychoactive. It's not going to make you feel better. It's not going to make you feel more alert or more able to concentrate. It doesn't improve focus. It does nothing for you mentally. It's only a physical stimulant. Now, for reasons that I'm still trying to figure out, walking around with this little rolled up pile of leaves in your fingers is supposed to look cool, right? You're really something. You're a grown-up if you can walk around with this burning stick in your fingers. And perhaps as a result of that, yeshiva boys and girls want to look cool, they want to belong, they want to show that they are able to engage in adult-like behavior, and they get into it. Here's the problem. While there are probably a minimal amount of health risks with smoking a cigarette here or there, and it's probably minimal, what rapidly happens is that because the kids are doing this, because they're expecting some sort of an outcome that's going to affect their lifestyle, it's going to affect their status, then they repeat it and they do it again and again. And here you have to look at this. Most people, their first cigarette makes them turn green, get nauseous, cough their brains out. It's a really uncomfortable experience. And people go back and repeat it and do it all over again. You have to wonder why. It's obviously they're willing to experience discomfort in order to get that status of being able to smoke a cigarette without having to go through all this. So they push themselves past this and they develop a degree of tolerance. Now, tolerance, schmolerance. But once somebody becomes dependent on cigarettes, which can happen very quickly, guess how long it takes between the finishing of a cigarette and the onset of withdrawal symptoms where the body begins to experience discomfort craving the next cigarette. Take a guess. 20 minutes. Give or take 1 or 2. So in approximately 20 minutes, the body has begun to experience withdrawal and is begging for the next cigarette. Withdrawal symptoms don't feel very comfortable. They don't feel very good. So somebody who's experiencing them is just out of sorts, not with it. Something's bugging them. And they know what's going to solve it. Withdrawal from anything. Withdrawal from alcohol. Take a drink. Best cure for a hangover. Another drink. Very simple. It's elementary. And no matter how young you are, you can figure that out. So they develop the dependency on nicotine. And 20 minutes after the cigarette, they're ready for the next one. Now, circumstances aren't always conducive to them having the next cigarette 20 minutes later, so they'll go about, they'll do something else. If they're in school, they'll finish the class, maybe 2 more class periods. If they're in yeshiva, they'll finish the seder. They'll wait till they can go outside because of all our discriminatory laws that discriminate against smokers, and they'll get their opportunity. What they have done is they've created a situation that gives them a very false impression. They believe that a cigarette will relax them. And that's pretty weird because nicotine is a stimulant. It's an upper. How does an upper relax you? Coffee doesn't relax you. Stimulants don't relax you. However, if you are experiencing discomfort because you have a dependency on that discomfort, that anxiety, or whatever those withdrawal symptoms are, will go away when you have it. Right? So here you're experiencing withdrawal from nicotine. You'll take a cigarette, and no sooner than you've taken the first puff, or that you've lit it up, you begin to experience relief from the withdrawal symptoms. It's not relaxing you. It's removing discomfort that you gave yourself. Think about it. You cause an addiction by repeating something until you develop a dependency. You experience withdrawal. You treat the withdrawal by continuing the same behavior. So you perpetuate your own dependency. I have a very simple idea, which is economic. It's frugal. Let me not have the addiction in the first place, and let me not have to relieve it by maintaining it. Now, you want to know dollars and cents? What's a pack of cigarettes cost? Right? When you drive past all these gas stations where they sell them, and grocery stores where they sell them, it says specifically, maybe today the cheapest pack of cigarettes is close to $6. All right? Think about a pack a day, which is most people's habit, although I know many people who do 2 packs a day. Well, let's talk about 1 pack a day. They don't smoke on Shabbos. Miraculously, they manage. So it's $6 a day, right? Multiplied by 6, 36. $36 a week on cigarettes. 4 weeks out of a month, 4 times 36, do the math. You've got many hundreds of dollars, at least a 4-digit figure, going up in smoke every year. That's just out-of-pocket expenses. We haven't talked about what it takes now to cover up the smell of smoke so that your parents shouldn't catch you. We're not talking about the chances of breaking the law if you're not old enough to buy cigarettes and somebody sells them to you. We're not talking about you're buying a pack of cigarettes and not even smoking all 20 of them because your friends come and mooch them off of you, and you have to be nice to them. So it's a really expensive habit, both financially as well as the kinds of risks that you're taking. Here's where in this context, you can understand the Chavetz Chaim statement, where he specifically spells out the fact that smoking causes a dependency, which means that you are relinquishing a degree of control over yourself to the inanimate object of a cigarette. Think about that. How would you like something to control your life other than your own power of decision? You are giving up, you're relinquishing control over a portion of your life to an inanimate object. Now, when I discuss this with many people, they say, well, this Rosh Hashiva used to smoke. That Hasidic Rebbe used to smoke. And they can turn around and enumerate, and I'm not sure where the source of this is, but people say over that Chaim Brisker used to smoke cigarettes and exhale into bags that he would seal because he was so dependent that he would have to go and open the bag and inhale that smoke during Shabbos when he wasn't able to light a cigarette. I don't know if that story is true or it's not, but think of the degree of dependency that one is relinquishing to this inanimate object. That, the Chavetz Chaim says, is not an appropriate thing. There are plenty of Gedolei HaPoskim who have put themselves on record, some on tape, some in print, that smoking is a clear halacha problem in the Shmartem L'Nafsho Seichem, which we read in the Parsha recently, is a lav. It's loisasa, where the Torah prohibits us from doing anything that damages our health. And that lav is being violated with every cigarette. What about if somebody's dependent? There is a chiyuv, there is a clear obligation for somebody to give up the cigarette smoking and do whatever they have to. There are hundreds of smoking cessation programs out there. Some use medications, some use various forms of nicotine in decreasing doses. There's patches and gums and fake cigarettes. There's all sorts of things out there. But there is an absolute uncompromised chiyuv of anybody at any age. Let me take this in the direction to put this presentation in context with the one that's going to follow. Some years ago, I was privileged to locate a copy of a book, which was published, I think, in the early 70s. The title of the book is Getting Tough on Gateway Drugs. Author is Dr. Robert DuPont. Now, Dr. DuPont prides himself that he was in public service working for the federal government for, I think, about 13 years or so. And he did an excellent job when he was there. He proceeds to say, I believe that he was the drug czar, although it was called something else then, for the White House. I believe during President Carter's term. What he goes on to say is that he regrets from his years of public service only one thing. And the one thing is that he wasn't as tough on marijuana as he should have been. Now, I would be delighted to spend a lot more time discussing marijuana, but I'm going to be taking away a lot of the thunder that Lou Abrams has in the chelik sheni of this, so I'm going to leave it to him. But this is a chapter in the book, Marijuana, the Dumb High, where he addresses 4 substances as gateways to harder drugs. So he's referring to these as soft drugs, and that these are the introductory levels to drugs that are more serious. Interestingly, this book is dated because one of the gateway drugs, number 4 on his list, is cocaine. Again, Lou is going to deal with that, so I will let you either attend that one in the next segment or to get the tape. But cocaine at that point was a gateway drug. Today it's a street drug, and it's considered a very hard drug. The number 3 on the list was marijuana. Number 2 on the list is alcohol. Number 1 on the list is tobacco. Now, somebody threw a statistic at me a while ago, and this is obviously done in humor and in jest, but it said something like 98.9% of people that die have eaten pickles. And the question is, of what value is that? You can't do anything with a statistic like that. If you treat it the way other statistics get treated, it's okay. Pickles cause death, which would be an unfortunately inaccurate conclusion. The statistics are that everybody, close to 100% of people who get into the harder drugs have previously used alcohol and or marijuana and or tobacco. Marijuana users have typically smoked tobacco before they've moved into the other drugs. And literally what we are looking at is tobacco being a gateway drug, alcohol and tobacco being gateway drugs, that kids will start with these and then they will progress and move to the harder ones. Not everybody who drinks and smokes is going to become a heroin user or a cocaine addict. It would be a childish and infantile conclusion. But Lamaisa, in practice, these substances are very commonly stepping stones to things that are worse. Now, if they were about as dangerous as pickles are, I would not be concerned with them. But tobacco and alcohol have plenty of their own dangers. I remember many years ago when I was in my doctoral program for psychology, I was brushing up on some psychological testing experience, and I was given access to do testing on patients who were detoxing from drugs or alcohol in the hospital. And I came up there and I was given a name for purposes of this, John Doe, and I came up there to look at his chart, and I asked the head nurse, do me a favor, point me out John Doe. And she takes me down the hall to the lounge area. There's a television there and whatever, and there he is, that's the fellow sitting over there. Now, the little bit of history that I knew about him is that he was a coal miner, and he worked in the mines until a couple of years ago. And here he is, detoxing from alcohol. His family brought him in. John was drinking at least a fifth of liquor a day for many, 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 many years. Now, he's been working in the coal mine since before the age of 20, and he did it every day all through his working years and even after he retired. And he only stopped, and he's detoxing, so now is probably the first time that he didn't drink for 2 days in a row. And I go over to him and I say, John, nice to meet you. Tell me, John, how old are you? And he sits there and he scratches his head and he says, 62? No, maybe I'm 64. Maybe it's 61. I'm not sure. What does it say in my chart? The guy didn't know his age. I said, your family brought you here? Yeah. Your children are grown? Mm-hmm. How many children do you have? And he starts to, is it 2? Oh, there's this one, there's that. He didn't know how many children he had. He had 4 kids, but he just couldn't come up with the number. It was amazing to watch somebody whose memory was so deteriorated, all from alcohol. All from alcohol. His liver was shot, and his brain was going quickly. When you see that, it's got to make an impression, because many years before, there must have been other levels of deterioration, and he kept drinking. Like, why not? That's what you do every day. The effects of smoking, they're well publicized. It says it on the side of the box. Surgeon General has determined that smoking causes, and then it depends which box you got today. The men aren't terribly impressed about the low birth weight in infants, right? They're not very impressed with that, but it does talk about high blood pressure, it talks about coronary artery disease, it talks about emphysema, it talks about lung cancer, and I don't know what else, because I haven't checked boxes of cigarettes. You have to wonder about that, because it doesn't get to the side of the cigarette pack until after the research has been pretty conclusive. So here you got a smoker who's been doing a pack a day, just 20 cigarettes to a pack, right? How many times do you think that the smoker catches a glimpse of the message on the side of the box? At least 5 times out of a pack. Pack a day, 5 times they see the message. But the Surgeon General says, in any degree of elaboration, the stuff in this box will kill you. Very simple. It just, this one says it will kill you this way, that one says it will kill you that way. What is it that you say to yourself when you see that? Because you're taking it out ready to light up. What are you saying to yourself? It says this will kill you. So you're going to do it? Let me ask you a question. What would happen if you were notified that the cookies that you buy, the brand of cookies that you buy, with a hechsher, was now discovered that there is so many parts per billion of rodent hairs in the cookies? I'm not making this up, because when I was in yeshiva, there was a recall on cookies that came from a particular manufacturer, including the store brand, and with a hechsher, and you have to be careful. There's a recall. Anything with these numbers on it, take it back to the store, you'll get your money back. And people were looking at this and saying, well, does it have shishim? Does it not have shishim? It was very interesting to watch how people did bilbo on this. In any case, somebody went over to a very well-known paisik and said, Rebbe, if it only has like 8 parts per billion, then it's botel b'shishim. Any issa would be botel b'shishim. So considering that there's an issa to eat rodent hairs, I'm not terribly sure that there is, but considering that there is, it's botel. Is there an issa to eat it? And he said, yeah, there is an issa. There's a lav in the Torah, there's a loisas in the Torah that says, al tishak tzilus nafshesechem. Do not do anything which you find disgusting. If it disgusts you, don't do it. You don't want to eat rodent hairs. Forget about botel b'shishim. 8 parts per billion, if it's enough that it flags it for the federal government, for the FDA or whoever, do you want to eat these rodent hairs? If it's disgusting to you, you're not allowed to eat it. Forget about what volume it is or what percentage. When we look at a pack of cigarettes and it says this will kill you, what is it that we answer ourselves before we light up? Well, you don't get emphysema from one cigarette. You get emphysema when you smoke for like 50 years and you do a pack or more a day, and that's what will cause it. You don't get it from one cigarette. And I'm only smoking one cigarette. The only thing is you've given yourself this justification, how many times every single day and for how many years. Well, it only happens to people that are old, and if their health is compromised, and I'm going to stop next year anyways, as if you can plan these things. After all the justifications, you're still lighting it up. You're still inflicting that kind of damage. You're still doing it despite the fact that it has negative consequences that you know about. Look at the process. See, one of the reasons that alcohol and tobacco are gateway drugs is because they prime and prepare the thinking process that after these, you can find the same pattern of rationalization and justification, and you can apply it to the most serious drugs that there are out there. You can say, no, ma kol harash, what's so terrible? I'm going to get high once, or I'm going to do it just for one afternoon or one night. What's the big deal? Why are we making such a catastrophe of it? Guess what? The addict is in denial. The abuser is in denial. They excuse it. They rationalize it. And if you're going to rationalize something that should not be done, you're setting yourself up, because today you're rationalizing this, tomorrow you're going to rationalize something else. And that's precisely why alcohol and tobacco are gateway drugs. Because you take something which we can recognize what the dangers and what the damages are, you justify it, you excuse it, and you prepare yourself to justify and excuse anything else. I have to tell you that I was driving home yesterday, and about a block and a half from my house, I saw a boy who I know lives on my block. This is a Chassidish yeshiva boy. And he's probably now turning 16 or 17. I don't know exactly. I'm not sure exactly his age. And I saw the boy walking with a cigarette in his hand. This is the first time that I saw that. And I never, ever dreamt that this is what I would see this boy doing. This other kids in the neighborhood that, this one's a little this and that one's a little that. I was horrified. And I found a parking space. As of tonight, I won't be able to find parking spaces anymore. But I parked the car, and before I got out of the car, I just sat there for an extra minute. And I thought, what should I do? Should I approach the boy's father? I know him from the block. I know him from shul. I know him for years. Should I approach him or should I not? Does he know? Does he know that his son is now smoking cigarettes openly in the street? Does he recognize that this boy has just taken a very small, maybe it's a baby step, maybe it isn't, but let's even assume it's a baby step. But he has taken a step in the wrong direction. Should I tell him or should I not? I haven't resolved this conflict in my head. But I have to tell you, it bothered me. I could not eat supper last night because this kid, this family, we have to be careful. We are dealing with substances that are not only toxic themselves, but what does it mean? They get into the pattern. I will do something, even if it has a negative effect, but I can rationalize it, I can justify it, I can poo-poo it, I can make nothing of it, I can minimize it. What follows after that? That's going to be part 2. And I hope that, I haven't seen Lou yet. I miss him a lot. I haven't seen him in a good couple of weeks. But you need to know that what's going to follow in the second chelik of this is every bit as true as what went on in the first chelik. There is as much going on with the hard drugs as there are with what we are artificially labeling as soft drugs. And it is frightening. And I hope we can learn some things from it. We have to take steps ourselves to clean up our communities. We need to be clear about keeping simchas and affairs dry without the alcohol. There is a proper place for it, but there are things not to do with it. And we also have to eliminate smoking. I daven steadily, constantly, that our poskim should have the bravery to stand up and recognize that smoking is dangerous and that there is a halacha that says that you cannot do it. We're makbid about putting filters on our kitchen sinks. We're makbid that this has to be this, and that hechsher is not good enough for me, and that hechsher is not good enough for me. I'm sorry. We're missing a big, big, big piece. We are essentially at the level of our leadership accepting the unacceptable. And we have to stand up, we have to take a stand. Thank you.